Hello, YouTube. It's Christmas weekend, 3-day weekend. Woohoo! Merry Christmas all. But I ordered one of those cheap pinion depth tools for an 8.8. Unfortunately, Christmas and everything. It's not going to be here till the 27th, and I want to go ahead and get these gears in. So we're going to make an attempt to put them in without that checker tool. I'm going to try some measurements. I'll show y'all what I try. But now before, I've always just used the stock pinion shim. I had the bearings pressed off and pressed on by a machine shop. But as y'all seen last video, I was able to use an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel, a chisel, and a hammer, and the freezer and the oven to put those bearings on, and a punch and a hammer. Now the pinion bearing, I didn't do that one yet, just because we set up a dummy bearing. I sanded out a new bearing to use as a dummy bearing to get my pinion shims correct before I press the other one on. But I'm going to do the pinion bearing when I do finally put that on for final assembly. I'm going to do it the same way in the refrigerator and the oven. That bearing actually slides on easier than the carrier bearings. But what else was I going to say? No, I remember what I was going to say. So usually I just use the stock pinion shim and have the machine shop press the pinion bearing off and back on, and the carrier bearings back off and back on. I put the gears back in there, and then I set the backlash by hand, and I didn't have a measuring tool for that then, but I've done like 4 rear ends like that, and only one of them whined on me. But since that one whined on me, I figured I'd try to do these correct. Let's get into this and try to take some measurements. Now on the end of the pinion, usually they'll put a checking distance number. Mine has 2.63. All right, and as you'll see, where's that? Can you see it? Let me lock it off. Yeah, that helps. Let me turn the light out. Yeah, there we go. CLD checking length, I don't know, 2.630 is what I think that says. So, crudely, this is the way I did it. Apparently, these are cut after all this is done, so checking from the top of these isn't the good way to do it. So what I've done is I took a straight edge. I ordered a checking tool, but like I said, it's not going to be here. I want to try to get this done today. What I did was I crudely set this in here straight up and down like that. And then I took my measurement tool and I measured, kind of like that, straight up and down. Bringing that all the way up to the straight edge and holding the straight edge straight up and down. And I did that a few times. I'd wiggle this around and remeasure it and remeasure it, and I found the shortest distance. And again, that's a crude way to do it. I don't know if this is going to get us there or not, but anyway, I put the pinion in with no shims. Actually, I think there's a small shim in there, but and I tightened. I did not put the crush sleeve on it. I did put the outer bearing on it. I didn't put the crush sleeve or solid spacer. I don't use crush sleeves, and I'll get into that later. I use solid spacers. They're way easier to work with. And I tightened all that up. Now be careful when you tighten that nut up, because there ain't a crush sleeve or solid spacer in there to keep it from tightening all the way up. And if you tighten it up too tight, you'll ruin your bearings. Which the bearing on this other side is a dummy bearing that I ground out, so they're not the final assembly bearings. And that bearing right here is the bearing, the old bearing I took off the old carrier. So if they get smashed, they're fine, as long as it doesn't hurt the race. And it's hard, it'd take a lot to hurt them races. But anyway, I tightened this all the way up till there was no up and down or side by side slack. And then I took that measurement. Now, I also know that these that go in here, these races for the bearing, they're 3.062. So I divided that in half, and then I added it to the measurement I got here. That didn't make any sense. It's the center of this round part to the top of the pinion right there. So the center of this, which 3.062 for the bearing race where it bolts to, cut in half, that gives us the center of this, and then to the top of the pinion head. So right here I got 1.12. Half of that bearing race is 1.531, which gives us 2.65. We need 2.63, so we need a 0.21 spacer for the pinion to bring it up. Yeah, to bring it up, to shorten this distance to this, it needs to come up. So let's go ahead and take the pinion back out, and then we'll add a pinion spacer and put it back in and see what we get. And I'm just gonna 1.12, that was our crude measurement we took. Again, this ain't the right way to do it, but at least get us in the ballpark. But I minused this number from that number. That way we know that that shortest checking distance we can get, the way I'm crudely doing it, needs to be 1.099 or 1.1, be close. Also, when you put all this on and you're checking everything, use the old nut. You don't want to use the new nut until final assembly. But to take all this out, what I've been doing is unscrewing this, and I've been holding this with a pipe wrench. And then just been taking a board and smacking on it. Now if I need more, I hit it up here with a hammer. But I knock all the way that all the way down until the nut bottoms out. Then I take the nut off. It usually falls out, but if it don't, I just take a punch and a hammer, tap, tap. I put a pillow down there because that's going to fall out. I don't want it to hit anything it shouldn't hit. I don't think it'd hurt it if it did, but just in case. All right. So this is our dummy bearing, the one that we hollowed out with a sanding wheel. And this will slide off. Sometimes I gotta give it some persuasion with a screwdriver, but yeah, it comes off. And this is our old bearing. I hollowed this one out too, so it'll slide off and on too. It just makes things easier. That's the old bearing. That's a new bearing that I sanded out with a sanding wheel. It took forever. But anyway, there was a shim already in here. Check the bottom of the bearing too, because sometimes the bearing, a shim will stick there. But I had a really small shim in there. But now, we're going to leave that shim there because that's what we measured with. Now we're going to measure one of these and find one that's closest to 0.021 and put it all back together. Look at there, I found one that was two of them stacked together exactly 0.21. So we'll take those, put them right there. And then we'll put our dummy bearing back on. And then we're going to put all that back in again without the crush sleeve. We stick it in, put that on, put our yoke on, put our nut on. We're not doing the crush sleeve yet. And again, when you tighten that nut up, be careful not to tighten this too tight, because if you tighten this too tight, there is a setting for this, and we'll go over that when we do final assembly. But if you tighten this too tight, you'll ruin the bearings. It'll crush them. All right, I stuck the pinion with the pinion bearing up in there. I put this bearing in there, and then I put the yoke on, put the nut on. And again, you'll have to hold this. They make a tool for that, but you'll have to hold this and tighten the bolt up at the same time. But you want to get all the up and down slack out of it. Don't over tighten it. You'll ruin the bearings. which it doesn't really matter in our case because this is an old bearing and that's a new bearing that I hollowed out. The final assembly bearings are brand new. They're sitting over on my toolbox. But yeah, try not to do that. But you do want to get this pretty tight. I think with new bearings, it's around 20 inch-pounds turning force with a beanstop top torque wrench. And then with old bearings, it's around 10. But I'll get the exact numbers on that later. But we got a new bearing that's been hollowed out and an old bearing, so I don't know. Which we're not worried about that just yet. We'll worry about that on final assembly. We're just trying to get the depth of the pinion and the wear pattern on the gear set correctly right now. And to do that, we just have to get this up and down slack out of it. Right there, we got it tightened up. No up and down slack. No left and right, up and down. And it is just a little tight to turn, not much. You can feel some drag. That's where we want to be. All right, that's the measurement we got. So this shows me that crude way of me measuring this is actually turning out pretty accurate, because with that shim, that should have put this at 1.099 and we're at 1.098. Again, whoops. When I put this in here, I moved it around, took a measurement, moved it around, and I found the smallest measurement I could get with the calipers like that coming up against it. And again, I know that's a crude way to do it, but at least it's going to get us close. Now we can put the carrier in, but these are the carrier shims that came with it. So you get new ones in the kit. It's just a 8.8 gear change kit or whatever they call it. Now you want to use the ones in the kit, and the reason for that is because there's a thick one that's got a ledge on it, and then there's another thick one, and then you put your spacers in the middle. But initially, to start out, I measured the thickness of the one. They're going to be different thicknesses, so when you take these out and when you take the caps out, make sure you don't get them mixed up. They need to go back where they came out at. But I took the thickness of this shim and I found this combo and made it the same thickness. And the reason it's, even if those got you dead on, I'd still use these, just because like it's just easier to fool with. Because when you move that pinion down, you got to move the ring gear over. And if you got these, you just take a shim out of this side and put it in that side, and boom, it'll move it over. To get your backlash correct, which is what we're going to go over here in a little bit. Now, I had the backlash already set with these where the pinion was before, and even checked the wear pattern off camera, but you can see it was too shallow. This is the heel, the top part, and this is the toe. This concave part, that's your drive side. That's the most important side. That needs to be in the middle. And this is your coast side. This one ain't as important. You want to try to get it in the middle, but the most important thing is to get the drive side in the middle. But anyway, now, since I already checked that, and we raised this up, we got to move the ring gear over. So I got to take one shim out of this side and put it in that side, and that should get us close. And when you tighten everything up, be careful, because if you ain't right and you tighten these, torque these down, it'll gouge the ring gear into the pinion gear and might leave a mark. So you might want to check that. You might want to snug them up first, make sure you got backlash, tighten them a little, make sure you ain't got no backlash, and then tighten them the rest of the way. I've been putting them at 80 foot-pounds, but yeah, these ones in the kit, this big thick one on the outside, let's see, it's got that lip on it for these shims to fit on, so they fit on there and stay. And then you use this outer thick one as a cap, like that, and then your shims go in the middle. Same thing on the other side. And like I said, it just makes it easier. If you drop the pinion down, the ring gear's got to come this way. So you take one out of this one, put it in that one. It just makes it easier, you know, than trying to use these thick ones and adding and removing shims from them that come stock. But I hope that makes sense. But anyway, now the way it can be kind of tricky setting this in here. So what I do, or if I can grab it, I go ahead and set it in there. I move it all the way over to this side. Then I take the race, put it in there like so. Probably have to lift up on that a little bit. And then that gives me room to slide those in. Once I got those slid in, I slide it over and angle it up, put the race on this side, and then if you lift the whole thing up and put the shims in and push down at the same time, it'll usually go, the shims will usually go in. But these shims, they have to be so thick that the race puts a load on the bearings. You have to have a load on the bearings. So these shims shouldn't just slide in and out. When you take this thing out of here, and you got the shims and everything in, you should have to pry it out. You shouldn't be able to lift it out. And I did have to pry it out earlier to get it out. And you should have to knock them in, because like I said, there's got to be a load on them bearings or they'll fail. But yeah, let's go ahead. We raised the pinion up, so I need to take a shim out of this one and put it in this one. We'll go ahead and put those in. All right, slid those shims in, slid everything over. I lifted up on this, I put the race on, and now I'll put these in. And when I put these in, I have to lift up on everything and kind of apply pressure this way so these don't fall out, and slide these in at the same time as I go down. All right, slid them in. Like I said, you shouldn't be able to push them in by hand. So what I've been doing is taking a punch with a hammer and knocking them all the way in. If you hear a thud sound like it bottomed out and you know they're not bottomed out, you'll have to redo this, because sometimes these shims, they'll hit a little groove in there, an oil groove. So just keep that in mind. If you're beating the crap out of them and they're not moving, it's hitting that. So you'll have to lift up on it and push down and reset these. There we go. Knocked them in with a punch. They went right in. Make sure there's some backlash there. We'll go ahead and put our caps on, tighten them up a little bit. Again, make sure there's still some backlash, because we don't want to, if these are too far off and you tighten those caps all the way up, it's going to push the ring gear into the pinion. It could make a little groove in it, so be aware of that. And again, keep these caps separate. Arrows point towards the outside. If you take the left one off the left, it's got to go back on the left. Take the right one off the right, it's got to go back on the right. Don't get those mixed up, because these are cutting away that they need to go back where they came off of. All right, tighten them up, snug. Still had backlash. Put them at 30 foot-pounds. They still got backlash, so I'm gonna go ahead and go to 80 foot-pounds on those, and then we'll see where the backlash is at and adjust the shims as needed. All right, we're not zeroed out, but you can clearly see. We've only got about 3 or 4 thousandths. Now the paperwork I got said you need 7 to 9, but the GM says 8 to 12. But anyway, so to get more backlash, we have to move the ring gear away from the pinion, so it needs to go this way. So we need to take another one out of this one of the smaller ones, and put it over here. So one out of here, put it over here, moves it this way. So we have to break all this loose. This is a tedious process, man. And then recheck our backlash, and then recheck our wear pattern. If the wear pattern ain't right, the pinion's got to come up or down, and then we have to redo all this again, and then check the wear pattern. It's a tedious process, man. And again, you should not be able to lift that out of there. That's how much pressure is needed for the load on the bearings. You should have to pry it out. And this is a full spool. That's why it might look different than what you're working with, but they've got holes in it over here, and I just pry it out like that. All right. Then I just lift up on it some on this side and take these spacers out. Lift, scoot, slide it over, and then you can pull these out. So this don't even have to come out. If you do it just right. If you lift up on it, up and down, as you're holding these spacers, you can get them out. All right. We're at about 10 thousandths. 9 10 thousandths. That's exactly where we want to be. Let's put some compound on the gears and see where it's at now. I'm just going to re-smear all that in. Re-smear and add some to it. All right, here's what we got on the coast side. Here's what we got on the drive side. The drive side's pretty much right in the middle. Get some light on it. Yeah. That looks pretty good. That's right in the middle. If you look on this one. Also, if you look on the ones that, because I spun it all the way around, I put an impact on, or I spun it off of that. All the way around. You notice the rest of these where it transferred the paint, they put it right in the middle, right where it needs to be. I think that's going to do it. It's a little low on the coast side, but like I said, the drive side is the most important. Look where it transferred it to the drive side. It's right in the middle. You want that oblong football pattern. And we got around 9 thousandths of backlash, which is perfect. This is just where it transferred it over. I think that's going to do it. Now, when I get my tool on the 27th, we'll go over setting the pinion load correctly, putting the new bearings in it. But I'm gonna leave everything where it's at. When I get that pinion depth checker tool, as long as I'm within 2-3 thousandths, which I don't even think I need that tool now. I mean, I think that's about as close as it's going to get. Some of these are reading a little high, but some of them are right in the middle. See, those are right in the middle. And then here, it did the coast side better. I mean, the coast side's still about in the middle. If any, it's about a little low. But over here, that's the pattern right there. Yeah, if anything, it's just a little bit high. But now, so we're on the heel on the drive side and the toe on the coast side. And I've done this a few times off camera, guys, and that's about the closest pattern I've ever got. It's always heel on the drive side and toe on the coast side, no matter what I do. And I've tried from no shims to 70 thousandths worth of shims, and the 70 thousandths, that pattern's down inside there too deep for sure. But yeah, that's about where you want it, man. I think that's about as good as this gear set's going to get. This is just a cheap Summit brand gear set. But now, if you did want to fool with it, you take the pinion out. You change the pinion shims, add more, take more out, whatever you think. There are some things online, but they're kind of confusing, man. Some of them say if you're heel on the drive side, toe on the coast side, remove shims, and some will say add shims, or Some will say increase or decrease backlash, and I've tried all that, and it still does. That's the best I've got. All the other times it'd be more up here and then more down here. This is actually the closest to the middle I've got, and I fooled with this all day one day. But anyway, you can take pinion shims out, reset your backlash, do the wear pattern again, see where it's at. If you don't like where it's at, go the other way. You know, add or remove shims, go the other way from what you went before. Set the backlash again with your shims right here. Do your wear pattern. Try the, you know, if you get close, you can even try the backlash on the tighter side, which is 07, 08, or on the looser side, or 007, 008, or on the looser side of 011, 012, and see if that changes your pattern. Sometimes it will, but honestly, that's about as close as it's going to get for me. Like I said, I fooled with this all day yesterday, and no matter which way I went, it'd be high on the drive side toe and low on the, or high on the drive side heel and low on the toe side, coast side. That's the closest I've ever gotten. But I'm going to wait till the pinion depth tool comes in. I'm going to check it with the pinion depth tool. If it's within .003, I'm going to do a final assembly on it. And so once that comes in, we'll check it with that, and then we'll go from there.
But like I showed in the text there, normal or desired pattern is the drive side and the coast side in the middle. But GM goes on to say for the 8.8, the drive pattern should be centered on the tooth. The coast pattern should be centered on the tooth, like I just said, but maybe slightly towards the toe. So the coast side can be towards the toe as long as the drive side is centered. There should be clearance between the pattern and the top of the tooth. So you don't want that pattern to come off the tooth, which is, we're a little bit on the heel on the drive side, and we're a little bit on the toe on the coast side. And if you look at this, it says, if you look at this, I've got a picture here. It says drive side on the heel, coast side on the toe. Backlash correct. Thicker pinion position shim required. So we might need to go a little bit thicker. We might end back up with the stock .028 shim, but we'll see. We'll see.
Oh, I forgot to mention, the factory pinion shim was a 028. I'm at 026, if that helps you any. But again, when we get the pinion depth checker tool, we'll take the carrier back out and we'll see where that's really at, because that's a crude way of doing it. Alright, so once we get the pinion depth checker, we'll check that, and if it's within 003, I'm just going to do the final assembly and send it. But if it's not within .003, we're going to make some adjustments to the pinion shim, reset the backlash, check the wear pattern again, see if it makes it any better. If it does, we'll go with that. If it don't, we'll try to make adjustments or go back to what we had. But in the final assembly video, we'll go over what we have to do for the final assembly, because there's a certain... I'm using a solid spacer and some shims to get the pinion preload set correctly. I don't use the crush sleeves, just because crush sleeves and drag racing, the crush sleeve could crush, and then it messes up your pinion bearing preload, and then your bearings prematurely fail. So I use that crush sleeve, and it's easier to work with, because a crush sleeve, if you accidentally crush it too much, it's garbage. You have to take it all back apart, throw the crush sleeve away, throw your brand new nut away, and get a new nut and a new crush sleeve, which is a pain in the butt. Solid spacer, if you go too far, you have to take the nut off. You're just out of nut. But you gotta, like with a crush sleeve, and we'll go over this in the final assembly video, but with a crush sleeve, you tighten it up and crush that thing until you don't have any up and down movement, and then you tighten it up until you can put a bean style torque wrench on the top of it and turn the pinion with that bean style torque wrench until you're, with new bearings, it's like 20 to 29 inch-pounds. I'll look this up. This is just guesstimates. With old bearings, it's like 10 inch-pounds to be able to turn, you know, the pinion. But it takes about 160 to 200 pounds, foot-pounds on that nut just to crush the crush sleeve. And even when you're using a solid spacer, I guess you want to be over at least 160 foot-pounds on that nut. But once you got it all tightened down and everything like that, you put a bean style torque wrench on the nut and you're turning the assembly, and there should be enough drag on that pinion nut assembly, you know, to give you the inch-pounds of turning force is what you're looking for. And again, on a crush sleeve, if you go too far, you got to throw away the nut and the crush sleeve and start all over. Solid spacer, you just have to throw the nut away and get another nut if you go too far. But yeah, we'll go over all that in the final assembly. And but I want to check it with a pinion depth tool to see. Based on the instructions, it looks like we might have to add some shims, and maybe that'll bring the drive side in a little bit more to the center. But I've done this off camera. I was messing with it all day before I even made this video, and no matter, I tried from no shims, well actually a .005 shim, all the way up to a .07 worth of shims, and everywhere in between, and like 01, sometimes even 005 increments. And no matter, the only time that I got it in the middle was like .07, and I knew that was way too much. And you could see where the pinion was digging into the, or pushing way down in the bottom of the ring gear in the groove. So it no longer had that football pattern. It just had the top of the football, and the other half of the football was gone. So I knew that was too much. But this crude way of measurement almost got me back to the stock shim. And based on what I'm looking at, the Ford GM 8.8 instructions, and as far as that's saying, with us being a little bit on the hillside on the drive side, it may need just a little bit more shim, but we'll see once we get the pinion checker. We'll check that and then do final assembly on the next video. Y'all have a good one.